What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 210 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to continue my trend of talking about various graphic novels that feature robots, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about The Surrogates, written by Robert Venditti, with art by Brett Weldell, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Robert Venditti, he worked on X-O Manowar from the new Valiant universe that started about 7 years ago or so, and I really liked a lot of his work in that universe. I think he's done some Green Lantern stuff too, but I haven't read any of that. I had no idea that he did this miniseries, which I read a long time before I read any of the new batch of Valiant universe stuff, and Brett Weldell, the artist of this book, his style reminds me a lot of Ashley Wood's style. Ashley Wood was the artist and creator of Amazons versus Robots versus Zombies, which I talked about a few months ago, and I didn't really like that story, didn't really like Ashley Wood's style. I felt like it was very forceful, very violent, choppy. At times it was very difficult for me to even tell what was going on. You could say a lot of the same things about Weldell's style here, but I really like his style here, and I think that it works very well for this story, whereas I did not like Ashley Wood's style on Amazons versus Robots versus Zombies, and I can't really explain myself. They're not exactly the same. If you put a page of this up against a page of Amazons versus Robots versus Zombies, you could definitely tell some differences. You could say, okay, this one's done by a different artist than this one, but they are very similar. But I like the style here. I think it works very well. This story, even though it features robots, this is not what I would call a science fiction story. First and foremost, I would call this a noir detective story. This feels like something that Humphrey Bogart should be starring in. And I know they made a movie about this. I first heard about this book back in like 2009. I was taking a graphic novel class in college, which was probably my favorite class that I took in college. And I first heard about this book then. At the time, I think they were getting ready to make the movie, but it hadn't yet come out. I may be a little bit wrong on my timeline, but my professor, he brought this in and just briefly talked about it. It wasn't something that we discussed or anything like that in class, but my professor, he introduced me, unknowingly, I think, to a lot of different comics that I read at that time and bought because he mentioned them and brought them up in class, and this is one that he mentioned. And even though this does have robots in it, this is not a robot story. Like I said, this is a noir detective story that happens to have robots in it. You may be saying, okay, it's got detectives, it's got robots. It's kind of like that Copernicus Jones robot detective story that I talked about a few months ago. And no, not really. That story was a straight-up detective story that happened to have a robot as the protagonist. Whereas this, there's a mystery going on, but this, I feel like, goes a little bit deeper with its themes than Copernicus Jones Robot Detective. And I love that story. If you go back and watch my video, I had nothing but positive things to say about it. I think it did exactly what it was setting out to do. I don't think that they were setting out to explore the themes of identity quite like The Surrogates does. The Surrogates, I really feel like this is a scathing review and a scathing remark, if you will, on message boards and talking to people online and talking to people in real life. The basic premise of this, if you haven't seen the movie, I haven't seen the movie, so maybe the movie gets it totally different than the book, but the basic premise of this is that it's set in the year 2054, and basically all of humanity has a robot avatar that goes out and lives their life for them. So you stay in your room and you have this little wire connected to your head, and then your robot duplicate goes out and does stuff for you. And basically everyone has this, and then there is this guy who's going around destroying these robots, and he has a message that he's trying to send to the people, and he has kind of a terrorist goal in mind. And I will go ahead and say that the mystery aspect of this book is not one that you are going to be able to solve by yourself unless you already know the ending of the book. I believe it was Raymond Chandler who said that if you are writing a mystery, it needs to be something that you can solve by looking at clues in the story before you get to the actual denouement. And this does not have that, but I think it's okay because there's a lot of really interesting stuff being said here about identity and how people communicate with each other going into the future. This very much reminded me of getting on a message board and creating an identity for yourself. When you go on a message board and you create a username, you can say anything about yourself, and nobody is to say that you're wrong or right. They may not believe you if you say that you're a really hot girl and you're typing on your computer naked or whatever, they may not believe you. They may think, okay, he's a 40-year-old man and he's just trying to get a rise out of me or whatever. You get a little bit of that going on here, but this is basically a science fiction take on that idea. Now, maybe that's a little bit outdated now that we have Facebook, which I won't say that Facebook has entirely removed the anonymity from getting online and talking to people, although there's still a little bit of it. People will post pictures that are not of themselves, and they will post names for their Facebook profile that are not their names, and there's still a little bit of that you don't really know who you're talking to thing online. So I think that this book, even though it was written quite a few years ago, I still think that it's very valid, and it's still very, I won't say important, but it's a very valid book for our culture today. It's definitely trying to say something about how we approach life in this technological age. So even though this is not a story that makes the mystery a fair play mystery, I think that that's okay because there's still a lot of really good stuff going on with this book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, maybe even more than I did the last time I read this book, and I remember liking it quite a bit several years ago when I read it then. So I highly recommend that you read The Surrogates. I definitely think that this is one of the best robot detective stories out there that I've read. That's not a diss against Copernicus Jones' Robot Detective. I like them both in very different ways, but this is a very good story that I highly recommend. So that's about all that I have to say about this book. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.